Alright, so today we're going to be talking about Linux Bazzite, an operating system that you guys have been asking me to take a look at for a very long time now, and I finally got around to actually putting it on a system, giving it a go, playing some games, and I've been extremely impressed. It's definitely something that Windows should be scared of. So let's talk about my experience and show you some stuff. Now, for those of you that don't know what Linux Bazzite is, it's actually an operating system that's based on Linux, and it is a great alternative to Windows, especially if you are into gaming. It has been specifically designed for gaming in mind, so they've actually jam-packed everything into it that you need to be able to get gaming, from drivers to extra tools and things like that. But of course, to be able to install this and get this running, I need a system. The system that I installed it on is probably one of the worst that you could ever install it on, and that's because it's down to compatibility and things. Linux Bazzite and pretty much most Linux operating systems work better with AMD stuff, but unfortunately the system that I put it on was not AMD at all. This is my HP EliteDesk 800 G3. It has been featured in previous videos before. We purchased it and gave it a go, we upgraded it, and eventually the specifications landed on something that was pretty decent with Windows, but it is very questionable when it comes to Linux. The reason that I've gone for this system is because if the least compatible system can actually give me a decent experience, of course a better compatibility based system will give an even better one. Inside this system, it is a little bit old now, but we've got an Intel Core i7-7700, very old CPU now, and it is a 4-core 8-thread one, so it's not a lot to work with. We do have 16 gigabytes of DDR4, which is actually perfectly fine nowadays for gaming, and particularly with the prices of RAM increasing, it's something that you want to keep hold of. And then for the graphics card, we've got an Nvidia Geforce RTX 3050 6 gigabytes. Now, that's not the best graphics card in the world, but it will get you gaming, and of course we needed a low profile graphics card to go into this little tiny case, something that Nvidia is miles ahead of at the moment, particularly with the latest generations. They have low profile graphics cards in the 3000 series, 4000 series and the 5000 series, whereas AMD have kind of let that stuff go now, so you can't really get them. I could have built it into a bigger system, of course, but this is going to be a real test here. So let's go get this system hooked up and show you exactly what I did. So to install Linux Bazzite, it's actually very simple. All you need to do is head over to the website, go to the download section and configure the form to the system that you're actually wanting to install on. Here you will get a choice of different types of graphics cards, different types of desktop environments and things like that. We've gone for something pretty straightforward because our system is an Nvidia based one, so we're not going for that games console type controller based environment. We're going to go with a standard desktop. Once you've downloaded the ISO, you just need to write it to a USB stick using something like Rufus, drop it into the machine and follow the actual installation prompt. The installation setup for Linux Bazzite is actually very simple. It's much more simpler than Windows. You just follow the on-screen instructions, pressing next, 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 and setting things up. And then eventually, once you've actually finished that process, you'll be presented with a beautiful desktop just like this. This is Linux Bazzite running here. You've got a nice kind of branded background, which you can of course change. It is just an operating system. At the bottom, we do have like our Windows type start bar with a Bazzite icon in the corner. If we just click that, that's our application launcher. There's no adverts or anything like that on here. And of course, we don't need a license to be able to run this. It's completely free because it's based on Linux. We've also got all of the tools that you really need for a desktop pre-installed. They've thought about that too. We've got our web browsers. They also install things like Steam, which is great. We've got Steam where we can just click on it. It will open up and you can just log into it as normal, and we've got Steam running. It's also got a nice Black Friday sale at the moment as well, so you can obviously go and purchase your games and things like that. They also include Litrus, which is basically another type of launcher where you can launch games from GOG or Epic and things like that. I've not actually gone too deep into that while actually testing this system because most of my games are on Steam anyway. Steam is way more compatible than anything else, but maybe I will actually jump into that at another point. But yes, generally you have a nice Windows type desktop here where you can do pretty much anything you can do on a Windows system. When it comes to gaming, it will pretty much play most games. I will be honest, I've played a lot of games on this system now, but we will actually try one out. There is a built-in version of Mango HUD on here, and for those of you that don't know what Mango HUD is, that's basically like an MSI Afterburner where it will put your stats into the corner. To be able to set that up is very simple. They've basically baked the application into the operating system. So we need to go to a game in Steam, go to the properties, and then we need to set up the launch options. Now the launch options for Mango HUD are very simple. We've done videos on this in the past. We'll just go over to a different game here and we'll copy the command over. We're going to be testing Cyberpunk today because it's a nice game that lots of people still play. It's going to really test this system. So I'm going to be adding the launch options to that game. The launch options here are Mango HUD space % command %. That's basically going to say run Mango HUD and then run the original command, which is to start the game. So once we've added that launch options, all we need to do is press play, and this is pretty much it. A lot of games on Steam now do support Linux natively. I haven't actually had to run this game using anything like Proton or stuff like that. This is just going to start up perfectly fine. We've pressed go. It will download some extra files, so it's going to download some extra things that Linux needs to be able to do, but they're very small stuff. And obviously we've now got to the start menu. It's kind of created this new page where we can actually go into playing the game. We'll hit play in there, but so far everything is working beautifully fine. I was very surprised at how well this system run games and the compatibility between them, particularly with an Nvidia graphics card, because Nvidia is just not as supported as Windows is, but the game is loading up and we're going to get in there perfectly fine. Now the menu system is loaded perfectly fine in the game. There has been no glitches here. There's been no artifacting, nothing that I would expect from a Linux-based system. Even our Mango HUD here is displaying perfectly fine. We've got what our system specifications are. We're checking on the CPU utilization, temperatures, RAM, GPU, FPS, just everything that you can pretty much get under MSI Afterburner. It's something that I like to run, particularly when testing systems, because it will at least tell us how stable things are, if anything else. In the menu system, we're currently getting around 300 frames per second, but today's video is not about performance. This system is very low spec, so we're not going to get decent performance and we're not going to be able to really compare it against Windows. We're not here for that. We're just really looking for the compatibility and ease of actually being able to play games. So we're just going to hit continue here and we're going to get into the game. Hopefully it loads pretty quick. I'm not expecting too much though, because like I say, this system is very low spec and the CPU it's an older quad core now, so we're going to have to wait around a little bit for it. But if you had a much faster system, of course, this would just go through very quickly. So we'll just wait for the game to actually load up. The game is finished loading and everything seems to be running perfectly fine. We're not getting the greatest performance here, but we are in a vehicle. It's where the kind of hardware you use is going to suffer the most. So we're going to find a nice safe place to be able to get out of the vehicle, and then we can do a bit of running around. I'm not 100% sure what the configuration is on this system, but let's just jump out of the car now because it just makes things a little bit easier. So can't remember the button to jump out of the car. There we go. So the character is now jumping out of the car and we are on foot. We're going to just run around a little bit for a minute. Everything is still running beautifully fine. The system is warming up nicely. There are no issues, there's no glitches, and there's no graphical problems. It's just absolutely amazing at how this system can just start this without a Windows operating system. People kind of act like Linux is really bad at gaming, but things have changed a lot since a lot of people have really played it. But let's head over to the settings before we do anything else and see what we do actually have configured. In our graphics setting, we are currently set to a ray tracing low setting, which is absolutely insane for this graphics card. There's no way that we want to be able to do that. So let's go down the settings a little bit. We'll put it in a high setting or a high preset. And then what we are going to do is we do have access to DLSS. We're going to set it to a transformer model. Probably set this now to something like a balance setting. DLSS is really good even at a balance setting, so that's going to make a bit of a difference. So we'll apply that. Over in our video settings, we are running this at the moment in 1080p resolution. It's probably the maximum that this system can do, but again, if you had a higher powered system, you can pretty much go as far as you want it. Going back into the game, we can see that we're getting around 58, 60 frames per second now, which is actually pretty good. And everything is running perfectly fine. You could definitely play this game at this configuration with this system with Linux. Like I said before, we didn't even need to use anything like Proton to be able to get this running. It just natively run straight out of Steam and no issues at all. It was a bit of a shame that we couldn't get the system running with the Steam-based console interface, because this tiny little system here would make a great unit to be able to put underneath a television and make or build a games console. And unfortunately, AMD don't really have any decent low-profile graphics cards anymore, so it's not even like we can go for that as an option. But as far as a Linux-based system goes, Bazzite is really, really impressive. To be able to play this in this kind of format is great, really, because it does mean that it's going to open up such a gate to so many people trying Linux now. Bazzite have done a fantastic job, and you can just see it by playing a game just like this one. We're still getting around 55, 60 frames per second, so overall it's a decent experience so far. I was highly surprised at this. I thought we would get some kinds of issues, particularly with a game as big and as popular as this, but no, it works perfectly fine, and this pretty much translates into most games. So let's take a quick look at some others. Okay, so all of those games are actually games that were multi-platform games. That means that they were released across the PC, Xbox and PlayStation at some point. I didn't expect to get many problems with those types, but to be honest, they were probably the least compatible. Performance was reasonably good, and we can't compare this system to anything like a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X because the hardware inside of it just doesn't compete, but we can compare it in terms of compatibility against systems like the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, and against those systems it did really well. There was absolutely no issues. In games like Control, the system performed much better than you would have got from an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4, which were pretty much locked at 30 frames per second. We saw very similar in Doom Eternal, which was a game that would run at 1080p high on all of these systems, but again, we just got a much better performance out of mine. Then Metro Exodus, that was actually phenomenal on the Linux-based system. I'm not sure how this competes to a Windows-based one at the moment, but being able to get around 111 frames per second compared to the original Xbox One's 30 frames per second is definitely going to provide a much better experience. And then we've got the games like Resident Evil 2. Running that game in 1080p with a high preset, this system could achieve around 85 frames per second, which again could beat both the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 as well. The only one game that we did have a little bit of an issue with was Shadow of the Tomb Raider. For some reason, you got some artifacting when running the game in native against Linux, but by just enabling the latest version of Proton, it actually completely fixed all the problems, and the system slightly outperformed what you would get on something like the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4. But overall, performance doesn't actually matter. That's not what we're looking at here. We're just making sure that this system with a Linux-based operating system can actually play a multitude of games and play them as well, if not better, than something like a games console equivalent. So for the multi-platform games, I kind of got what we expected. I expected it to be able to do this. So again, I did some more testing, and I tested it against other games that were actually designed specifically for consoles. And this system again has done extremely well. I decided to load up 5 more games that were actually designed originally for the Xbox, mostly the Xbox One, and the system did exceptionally well here. Dead Rising 3 in 1080p with a high preset. The Xbox One would get around 30 frames per second. Again, this system was very locked down to that type of frame rate, and this system would also achieve 30 frames per second. I'm not quite sure why 30 frames per second was really the kind of cap here, but it seemed to be built into the game. It just simply couldn't get any more, so at least it could compete on that one. Quantum Break is a fantastic game. A lot of people don't really talk about it anymore, but it was originally released for the Xbox One as an exclusive. On the Xbox One, that game will run in 1080p with a medium preset, and you'll get around 30 frames per second. Again, it's just a natural lock on that system, but with my little HP system running Linux Bazzite, you can actually get an average of around 99 frames per second. That is a much better performance here, and it provides a much smoother experience as well. Rise Son of Rome is another game that nobody really talks about anymore, and it's absolutely fantastic. I first played it on the PC, and I wish that I'd have got it back on the Xbox One back in the day, because it was absolutely brilliant. And it ran perfectly fine on both these systems. Again, the Xbox One here, because it was a showpiece of a game when it originally released, will run in 1080p with a high preset, and you'll get around 50 frames per second, a much smoother experience than generally other games on the Xbox One. But with my little HP system, we could achieve around 86 frames per second. Again, making the game much more smoother and probably allowing you to raise those graphics presets up a little bit if you just wanted to match the Xbox One on performance anyway. But either way, the game looked fantastic in a high setting, and this system had no issues at all. Sniper Elite version 2 remastered was a little bit of a weird one here, because on the Xbox One it was very limited down to 30 frames per second, and that was running the game in 1080p with a medium preset, but with the little HP system and Linux Bazzite, you can get an average of 222 frames per second. That isn't a phenomenal difference here, and really goes to show how Linux has come really far, particularly when comparing it to these games designed for consoles. And then the last game in our list was State of Decay 2. This was another game that I played quite a bit on back in the Xbox One days, and it was very limited to 1080p with a medium preset, and even then, because again it was a very exclusive showpiece from Microsoft, you could get around 50 frames per second, but with the Linux Bazzite system we could get 89, which again is nearly double the performance here, so it just goes to show Linux can really actually pull this one out of the bag. It's not just Xbox One games though that I compared. Some of my most favourite games of all time are actually from the Sony Entertainment side. I think they just put a lot more effort into their games, they're a lot more cinematic, and it's the type of game that I like to play. So I compared it against some of those as well, and again, the results were really good. When it came to games designed for the PlayStation, I found that there was just a better experience across the entire board here. These games run natively against Linux, and it's something that Sony seems to have done on purpose, which is absolutely fantastic. And again, as you can see from the results here, it just means you're going to get a decent experience. Comparing our Linux Bazzite system against the PlayStation 4 in games like Days Gone, that game would run at 1080p with a high preset, and the PlayStation 4 was pretty much limited to 30 frames per second here. In fact, it was actually limited to 30 frames per second across all the games that we tested, but with our little Linux Bazzite system, we could get an average of around 64 frames per second. That's a fantastic result, because I do love that game, and it means that cobbling a little cheap system together like ours and installing a free operating system can actually get you some pretty decent performances there. God of War saw a very similar picture here, again locked to 30 frames per second on the PlayStation 4, but it was running at 1080p with a high preset. It just meant that the game looked a lot better. But with our little Linux Bazzite system, we could achieve around 51, and pretty much the same picture goes on and on all the way through the games. Horizon Zero Dawn, Spider-Man Remastered, even though the PlayStation 4 version was actually the Spider-Man non-remastered, so the PC version actually has a lot more kind of grunt needed to be able to get it to play, but this system still outperformed the PlayStation 4 by quite a bit actually. And then of course Uncharted 4, that one ran perfectly fine on this system, and when it came to the games designed for the PlayStation, everything ran beautifully smooth. There was no need for any kind of Proton to be enabled, it was just completely native all the way through. So my experience so far with Linux Bazzite has been absolutely fantastic, particularly for the games that I play. I am completely aware that Linux will not play all games. A lot of games that have anti-cheat mechanisms, and that's mostly multiplayer games, something that I just do not play, will struggle on a Linux-based system. They just haven't really figured that out yet. So if you are looking at something like Linux to be able to play things like Call of Duty, Battlefield 6, you're just not going to be able to do it because of that limitation. You will need to go with Windows for that. But if you are like me, who basically just avoids all multiplayer games and only really plays those cinematic action / FPS type games from the different console manufacturers, exclusives, I do really love exclusives. I think they tend to put a lot more effort in them, so I'm really happy when they do come across to the PC. You're going to be perfectly fine. Linux Bazzite has pretty much got you covered now. It is a fantastic operating system. It looks beautiful just as a desktop system. You're going to be able to do everything that you can in Windows. you've got your browsers, you've got your file systems, you can just do all of that kind of stuff. Linux Bazzite also has a very nice little store built into it, so it's like an app store where you can go and get different types of apps and things. I've searched it for a few things that I've wanted on a system, and they're pretty much all there. I mean, you can do some really good retro gaming based on this, and you can just get it from the App Store. Things like RetroArch, stick that on there, and you'll be able to play all of your old Sega games, your Nintendo games, your Sony PlayStation 1 games and stuff like that. So Linux Bazzite has absolutely wowed me a little bit. I really want to thank you guys for that recommendation. It's something that I didn't really keep up with because generally I'm an Ubuntu user, so I will just install Ubuntu and set it up myself to play games, but this is just absolutely fantastic. I think we need more people building systems like this to really kind of showcase what Linux can do, and hopefully the more people that take it up, the more developers will actually develop towards it. So that's always a bonus for the future. But there we go. Let me know in the comments below, do you run or do you currently run a Linux Bazzite system? Tell me your experiences. Are there any things that I need to look out for? I'm definitely going to start to introduce this more on the channel, particularly as a system for testing, because I just love the way that it works, and as well, the way that you can capture metrics and things using Mango Herd is just far superior to things like MSI Afterburner, so I'm definitely going to be doing that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, because I'm sure you're going to see Linux Bazzite again at some point, and I'm sure, as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.